Chapter 5. Lean into it. School in America was nothing like she had expected from the movies. Thank goodness. It had been interesting seeing all the different ways people raised and taught their kids. Even Care Mountbatten had been different than what she was used to in Ireland. But what really struck her about America was how little anybody actually cared. She had expected to find an obvious popular crowd. Without a uniform code, she figured they would be easy to identify, but even during lunch, with hundreds of students crowded around a single space, there was hardly anyone who fit the typical Chad and Stacy dynamic. Which was a relief. Most people were more concerned with what they would be having for lunch. Her day started with the others, which was a nice change. All six packed into language with a Swiss man named Mr. Bachmann, who proved his proficiency in all of the major languages by conversing with the class in Spanish, French, and Russian. Siobhan and Riley had arrived to class early, taking the time to visit the nearest Starbucks on their way to school, which hadn't taken nearly as much time as they had anticipated. When the others arrived, Siobhan had saved them seats, giving the one beside her to Margot, who seemed a bit surprised at her gesture, but took it all the same. She was not entirely sure how to read Margot. In the near week they had spent together so far, she had picked up on enough of the others to have a general sense of their personalities and quirks. Johnny was probably the easiest to read, given that he really did nothing with subtlety. Apart from the brief swear at the Guerin's kitchen table, which seemed to catch even himself by surprise, Johnny was kind to those he liked and dismissive to those he wasn't. And with that, it was obvious he was not a fan of either Margot nor Kent, and Emma was quick to fill her in on why. The most personality she saw from him came their first day at lunch, when he rather brusquely turned away a small freshman boy who approached their table looking for his autograph. Emma diffused the tension by offering the boy her own autograph as a consolation, but the damage had been done, and he walked away dejectedly. Johnny rather theatrically rolled his shoulder, and the blue tint of his arm shimmered into the colour of his skin. Emma was easily becoming her next best friend of the group, mainly because it was obvious she and Riley were siblings. If not for their looks, there were times Siobhan could hardly tell them apart. Their senses of humour were the same. Their timing and responses on things were scarily similar, and apart from the occasional feminine deviation with how she viewed the world and her place in it, there were times Siobhan almost forgot Emma hadn't been with her on her travels with Riley. Kent was a unique one. He had been the first of the squad she had met, both outside of Taylorsville and within, and yet there were times he felt like a complete stranger. They had texted on occasion over the summer in preparation for the move, and he was always kind, but after 3 months as his friend, she hardly knew anything about him beyond his name, which she only just learned was short for Kenton. Everything else was second-hand information from Emma, who had a complicated relationship with the boy, it seemed, and from surface-level observations. The easiest thing to understand about him was his complete obliviousness to not just the way the company worked, but people in general. After what had happened in the greenhouse, Siobhan pushed him heavily toward his friend Morgan, which seemed to be working. That afternoon, he was the only member of the squad not sitting together at lunch, instead joining Morgan with her motley crew of theatre kids, which Emma mentioned was common. Their obvious chemistry put Siobhan at ease. It was hard enough to turn down strangers, and she had caught him staring at her a few too many times in a way she thought was beyond friendly. But Margot was even more curious. After accepting her offer to sit beside her in language, the girls didn't see each other until third period fitness, and Margot hardly said a word to her through that or lunch. Her 2 afternoon classes were again separated from the rest of the squad, and by the time she had reached the training centre dressing room, Margot was already raring to go out the training floor. It was like she was actively avoiding Siobhan, which she thought was strange, given that Margot was practically a Guerin. From everything Riley had said, she knew not to expect a second Emma, but she was a bit thrown by what she viewed as unexpected hostility. As she ruminated it over the next couple of nights, though, Siobhan almost wondered if this was a sort of possessive defense of her adopted brother, and tried to be more understanding as the week went on. If Margot was trying to give her the impression that she wasn't good enough for Riley, the sentiment was rubbing off. In everything she did, increasingly so by the time Wednesday rolled around, Margot was subtly one-upping her in little ways, most notably in training, where she always managed to steal a kill from Siobhan's radar, showing off the skills with a rifle she'd hardly perfected in Scotland, and rarely improved at in her times of travel. Most peculiar of all was Margot's change in wardrobe. Monday she had looked a lot more like Emma, blonde sisters both outfitted in embroidered tops and jean shorts. The summer had refreshed Siobhan's familiarity with Western clothes, so she thought little of them, but Tuesday Margot had completely changed her approach, sporting a cropped t-shirt and a pair of questionably appropriate pants that she was surprised made it through the day without comment from any teachers. When the 3 girls found themselves early to the dressing room, Emma let her thoughts of the outfit known. Siobhan just smiled and complimented Margot's confidence. Thursday morning she woke as usual, staring at the hundreds of photographs adorning the yarn she had strung around the room in a slow spiral. Aside from Riley and the church, they were the only things she had taken with her when they had decided to leave Scotland. A cold shower was never her first choice, but her brother had instituted the practice to protect her pale skin. And after the few minutes of scrubbing and discomfort, Siobhan continued the act with lotion, smiling at her reflection in the fogless mirror. Confidence was never something she herself had struggled with, besides the condition of her face. Good skin was an issue her entire family had dealt with, and being the youngest, it was Siobhan's turn to endure the curse. Beyond an otherwise skinny frame, she was proud to have inherited the blessing of her mother's long runner's legs, but unlike her sister Neve, who had run competitively up at the Care, Siobhan was one who far preferred arts to sport. That was something she had grown to endure with Riley, who loved his teams more than any person she had ever met, save maybe his sister. But like she cared for him beyond his obsessions, he cared for her beyond how she looked. It was something she had worried she would never find, hearing the worst of what to expect of her male contemporaries ahead of her move to Scotland, but he had never asked for anything from her beyond her name, and she loved him more and more for it every day and place they shared together. Him not being a member of the church had been a major flag for her parents, but they had also hoped a boy in her life might simmer her fire. Riley was nothing if not an instigator for everything she loved, travelling most of all, and with hope that he might finally be pushed to join her in her journey, she eagerly awaited her assignment at the end of the year to see where to follow her next. Digging through her dresser to find today's outfit, she was reminded of how happy she was to have found a travel partner when she rediscovered her hijab in the back of one of the drawers. She had brought it with her as a reminder of their time in Saudi Arabia, that despite what her parents had warned her, she could endure anything she committed her mind to. Her leaving home had not been running away from her faith, but everything they had made it over her. The online community had reignited her passion for the book, and she had found half a dozen solid mentors to support her through her frustrations. The jump to Saudi Arabia had been such a successful experiment in re-engaging those restrictions. It almost recontextualized her childhood and her parents' impositions in her life. It gave her hope that her return to Ireland could be a positive one, but even with Riley with her to meet her parents, the trip instead made her miss Hadiat. She smiled as she prayed over the cloth, tucking it back in the dresser before finding a pair of blue leggings and a white top. Unlike Margot, the look was not to impress anyone, nor to prove to herself that she needed to look a certain way. She was simply excited to see herself looking like an American teenager for the first time in her life. And even if she never did it again, it was an experience she could check off her list that no one else could take away. The comparison to Margot passed through her head before she could stop it, and sighed ashamedly as she registered what she was doing. Just because the other girl had come across as hostile gave Siobhan no right to return the sentiment, and she was called upon to rise above her reactionary feelings. With a nod to herself in the mirror, she let the pride disappear, and prepared herself to accept whatever attitude the other were bringing today. That made it all the more awkward when Margot was the first thing she saw outside her bedroom door. "Oh my!" Siobhan jerked, blinking in the sight of the towering girl staring down at her. "Good morning." Margot was trying to smile, but it was obviously forced. Is she pretending to be kind? Siobhan thought. "Hi," Margot breathed, before quickly adding, "What are you doing for lunch today?" The smile remained, becoming more relaxed as the awkward moment went on. "Probably sitting with the squad," Siobhan answered. "Like usual." "No, you're not," Margot rejected. "You're coming with me to Clyde's." Siobhan felt her face squish in suspicion. "What's Clyde's?" "It's a diner over on Industrial Row," Margot clarified. "You'll love it." "Are you sure?" Siobhan continued, unable to stop herself. "You're not going to drive me to the other end of town and kill me, are you?" Margot finally revealed a genuine smile. It looked nice on her. "Of course not," she said. "I want to get to know you." "Well, that's a shift," Siobhan thought. "I know practically everything about the rest of the squad," Margot continued. "I'm hoping I can make you a part of that list too. I'm part of a list now," Siobhan heard inside her head. "All right," she vocalized and said. Just follow me out after third," Margot instructed. "We'll take the rail over." Siobhan was unusually at a loss for words. "All right," she repeated. Margot smiled her awkward fake smile again, before nodding and heading back down the stairs to the common room below. It took Siobhan a moment to register what had just happened before following her. Riley was standing in the kitchen with Emma. Margot had apparently already walked out with Kent. "You survived?" He nodded, judging her bewildered expression. "I mean, feels like the girl's been giving me the shoulder since the funeral," she voiced. "I guess we're going to lunch today." Riley turned to Emma. That leaves you and me, I guess. Emma curled her lip, looking for Siobhan for help. What? Riley pouted, seeing her worry. I promised Andrew I'd go to lunch with him, she said quickly. I'm so sorry. It's fine, he interrupted, turning to Siobhan before sighing back to Emma. He's your brother too. Siobhan could see the wall of tension building over the counter. You still have Johnny, she noted. Yeah, he sighed, but she knew that was a far less enthusiastic choice. Hey, where is the little weirdo? Emma crossed her arms. He's taller than you are. Everybody's taller than I am, Riley smirked, slapping her on the back. Except you. Her response was one her boyfriend nor her mother would have approved of. Siobhan had to stifle a laugh. Shane took him driving this morning, she said after Riley's eyebrows returned to their normal position. Shane Daniels, Siobhan raised. The Deputy Prime Minister. Why would he? He's mentoring him, Emma said defensively. They've a lot in common. Riley shrugged. Do they? Yes, they do. And is our brother still being mentored by the Deputy Undersecretary of Law and Justice? He asked. Emma's face dropped. Insinuate that about my boyfriend again and I'll burn your room to ashes. Riley held his hands up in surrender, but the damage had been done. Siobhan was not sure she needed or even wanted to know what they were talking about, but she could feel the tension returning to its place between them. Can you actually do that? She asked. Emma thankfully turned, distracted by the question. She sighed. Not before passing out, she admitted. Doesn't mean I won't try, though. I'm sorry, he said firmly. No, I'm sorry, she spoke over, taking another deep breath and avoiding his eyes. Just figure out where you guys are going at the semester break. Johnny and I want to come with you. It was not the first time she had proposed this, but she sounded utterly defeated this time, clearly bothered by what Riley had said. She scooped up her backpack and stormed out the front door. Siobhan turned to Riley. Why are you being weird? He turned to her in a huff. You know why. What? Because you're jealous? She pulled. I get that Andrew being back wasn't part of the plan. Wasn't part of the plan, he repeated. Shiv, you know I never would have said yes if I knew he was coming home. It's bad enough I have to deal with my dad. We both have parents that we loathe, and siblings we don't trust, she affirmed. That's part of why I'm drawn to you. But we spent 3 months with my family this summer. You can handle 4 with yours. You didn't have to deal with the things that I did. You're right, she said stoically. I didn't. Nor do I know what those things are, and that's fine. I don't need to know, Riley, and don't try to pretend we're fighting about my need to know. He frowned, his small eyes growing as round as they could be to give her his full attention. Are we fighting? He asked, his voice calm. No, she promised, reaching a hand to his face. But you're being a right Susan to your sister for no reason beyond supporting your family. It's my family too, he firmed, clenching his jaw against her fingers. It's not when you don't act like it, she noted. So if you want to get through the next few months retaining the one family member you don't loathe, you should give her the benefit of the doubt and let her handle unexpected situations differently than you would. Riley closed his eyes and took a deep breath, relaxing his entire body before he opened them again. Siobhan removed her hand from his cheek. I'm sorry, he apologized. I know you are, she said. And I know you can be better than this. That was usually the thing he needed to hear. I love you, he smiled. She laughed, shaking her head. Of course you do, she teased. What time is it? He answered without the clock behind him. 8:52. Exactly, she teased. You better get to class, Shorty. She made it through her first 2 periods fine, but today's challenge appeared in 3rd period, where Mr. Danseth used their fitness hour to work on hand-to-hand combat. Her partner of the day, of course, was Margot. How am I supposed to match her? She prowled to Riley as he separated to battle a freshman boy neither had seen before. I barely weigh 7 stone. Well, Emma's maybe 6.5, he noted, pointing across the room. She's doing fine. Sure enough, his sister was already finding ways to beat her opponent, who was noticeably thicker than Margot, even if her weight was compressed into a smaller body. If anything, that just made Siobhan more frustrated. Yeah, but she started, but Riley had separated himself from the pack with his partner. Athletic, she concluded inside her head. Siobhan's lack of coordination was often her downfall in training, and today's lesson made it no less apparent. Each whistle and repositioning, Margot was quick, using her long arms to wrap Siobhan's stick figure frame and throw her to the mat, only once managing to catch herself before completely collapsing on the foam. Whatever kindness Margot had approached her with that morning was gone. Whether for Siobhan's understanding or anyone else's, Margot was in the challenge to win. The worst part of the class was Danseth coming by every few tries to correct her form, or give her the most obvious grappling advice, only for Margot to overwhelm any attempt by sheer size and strength. At one point, Siobhan tried to take the advice of spinning into Margot's shoulder to break a hold, only for Margot to use her own weight against her, letting Siobhan fall to the floor without any sense of direction. She slammed to the mat face first and felt the blood rushing to her nose as soon as she picked her head off the ground. Margot stood there, anticipating another round. "Did I do something?" Siobhan hissed, loud enough for only Margot to hear. Both girls interlocked their fingers, waiting for another whistle. "Or do you just hate me because I'm dating your brother?" Margot shook her head, emotionless. "I don't hate you," she whispered back. "And he's not my brother." Danseth blew his whistle, and before Siobhan even had time to think, Margot swept her off her feet with a kick between her legs. This time she had the courtesy of catching her before she hit the ground, giving her time to panic before Margot daintily released her grip from the red shirt. Siobhan had never sworn on purpose, but she was feeling the urge to slip her very first F-bomb on Margot if she hinted toward their lunch after class. She'd lost track after 50 falls, and at some point wondered if her shoulder had not popped out of place during one of them. Maybe Emma would be kind enough to provide a heat massage later that evening. It comforted her to see Riley going 50-50 with his partner. Despite his love of sport, he lacked the athleticism of the Gerrans, another commonality they shared. He hit the ground hard with a high tackle from the other boy, who seemed to be growing more confident as their hour went on. Siobhan wished she had the same drive, but understanding she was never going to have a chance against Margot, began praying for the class to end. Margot extended a hand up after the final whistle, her smile from earlier returning to replace her competitive front. Siobhan allowed the help before storming off to the locker room. Frustrated as she was more confused than anything, trying to piece together Margot's change of attitude. The water from the showers did a lot to settle her heightened emotions, a voice in her head that was not her own encouraging her to give Margot the benefit of the doubt. "I don't hate you," she had said before dropping her to the ground. "All right," Siobhan thought. "I'll believe you. For now." With the blood washed away from her nose, Siobhan traded in her black leggings for the blue ones from before, and felt renewed, confident in herself again despite the events of class. She must have taken far longer in the shower than she realized. Riley was chatting with Johnny, waiting for her outside the locker room. Margot stood beside them on her phone. "Hey," she parked up, her friendly side on display. Riley spoke before Siobhan could. "Where are you guys headed?" Siobhan turned to Margot for the answer, not remembering the name of the diner. "That's our business," she said sarcastically, but upon Riley's skeptical glare added, "Clyde's." Johnny looked immediately jealous. "I haven't been to Clyde's in ages. People still go there?" Riley raised. "I figured they'd have torn it down by a reno by now." "We should go there too," Johnny pushed, keeping his eyes away from the girls. "Get your own ideas," Margot said harshly, before spinning to Siobhan. "If we want the full experience, we better go now. Otherwise, we'll never get back in time for 4th. Riley stared at Siobhan, probably wondering if she was still comfortable with it after the beatdown. Her compassionate side overpowered her uncertainty. "What she said," she seconded. "You boys have fun doing, whatever it is you do." She squeezed Riley's hand for assurance before following Margot down the hall. Clyde's, as it turned out, was the most stereotypical American hop diner she could imagine, complete with the same horrific 50s music that repeated the same 4 chords one after the other the entire time they were there. As soon as they walked through their front doors, Siobhan felt like they'd been thrown into an Archie comic strip. Complete with Buddy Holly glasses and pathetic paper hats, their meals were the most American set of burgers, fries, and milkshakes Siobhan could ever hope to consume. Never one to turn down food, despite what her figure would show for it, she was stuffed to bursting before she had touched a second chip. When she collapsed back against the vinyl booth, Margot grinned, continuing her way through the meal. Yet another thing at which she could beat her. To Siobhan's surprise, both because of the novelty of the place and the distance they had travelled from the school, Clyde's was packed. Thankfully, they had been among the first to reach it. By the time they were seated and placing their orders, there was a line out the door which could not possibly be satisfied by the time the next period began. "You're right about the line," she noted, and Margot turned to watch the participants slowly abandon their initial lunch plans. I told you. Clyde's is the goat, she returned, somehow completing that sentence without a hint of misgiving. I love America, Siobhan choked, not willing to elaborate on her thoughts beyond the food. Are you going to finish those? Margot wondered aloud. I feel like I've been starving myself for months. Have you? Siobhan thought. That would justify how thin Margot looked after what had happened, but she figured bringing that up out of the gate would eliminate all chance of this being a positive lunch experience. Granted, what spilled out of her mouth instead wasn't much better. Do you have siblings? She asked. You know, since you don't consider the Garens your real family. Margot's face tightened, dropping her eyes as she took another pull from her milkshake. Am I that readable? Not entirely, Siobhan offered. I'm still not convinced you don't want me strung up by my ankles, but your family pride is fairly obvious. Margot looked up, removing the straw from her mouth. I'm sorry about your shoulder. Are ya? Siobhan spat, harsher than she meant to. Margot sighed, wiping her tongue across her teeth. You're new here, she said, pointing out the obvious. You probably don't know her, but there's a girl in our fitness class on the hockey team. Real, you-know-what. I've been competing with her for a defensive spot every year I've played in Tylersville. And so you what, needed to prove yourself to her? Siobhan raised. Use me as a punching bag? I knew you could handle it, Margot returned. Seriously, I'm sorry about your shoulder. The look in her eye lacked the generosity of her other self, but for the first time Siobhan thought she saw genuine compassion behind the harsh blue irises. She heard the voice in her head again, and felt a wave of peace descend down her spine. You knew I could handle it, she repeated slowly. How? Margot bit her lip, her face reddening. Because you put up with Riley Guerin for 2 years, she said. I know you don't quit on anything. Siobhan laughed so hard she felt her milkshake returning to her nose. When she finally settled back down, Margot greeted her with a real smile. That's a good one, she admitted. I've been holding that in for an hour, Margot replied. I hope so. Siobhan reached across the table to her former tray and picked at another chip. If you're worried he won't spend time with you because of me, that's not... Margot interrupted, chewing her lip as she waited for the right words to form. Yes, I have siblings. Real ones. Siobhan waited for her to continue, but Margot's face remained solid, uncertain. I don't need to know your whole story, she said. Girl, that's your business. Margot stayed still. A look in her eyes was far away, like she was remembering something that might not be worth remembering. Does that mean you don't want to know, or... Siobhan sat up straighter against the vinyl. I'm here to be a member of your squad, with no ill intention toward you beyond what you feel, or I feel you're giving to me. If your story helps me explain why I've been struggling to approach you like the others, then by all means, share as much as you like. Margot blinked away the blackness. It won't. Fine by me, Siobhan volleyed. And can I ask what it is? No. Siobhan laughed again. Bloody ray of sunshine you are, you know that? Margot's cheeks flushed again, but she kept her eyes across the table. Tell me something about yourself first, she instructed. Why? Because I want to know if I can trust you. Trust me? Siobhan scoffed, throwing her head back in disbelief and scanning the room for another set of wondering eyes. What do you have to trust me with? Margot kept her mouth closed, but the red in her cheeks continued growing, enveloping her entire face. Fine, Siobhan railed. My full name is Siobhan Saoirse O'Reilly. I was born the 16th of January 1998 in Bray, County Wicklow. My parents' names are Jonathan and Cassandra. I'm the youngest of 8. In order, my brothers and sisters are called Tag, Quava, Ocean, Keegan, Blythe, Lachlan, and Neve. I'm not close with any of them. Lachlan was a jumper who drowned on a mission in Papua New Guinea. I feel nothing for his death, and I left Scotland to finally get away from my family, who I've always considered the most surface-level, narcissistic type of people imaginable, even beyond the religious side of what they practice. I love your not brother because he's the first person I've ever met who didn't try to justify my ill will toward my parents as some kind of religious turning. Nor was he confused by my commitment to who I am, even if that person is who they raised me to be. I don't care to be told what to do by anyone outside of a life or death scenario, and that self-confidence has in fact saved me and others from a tragic premature end. My favorite color is green. My account passwords are usually some number after the name Florian, who was an Irish setter we had until he died when I was 10. And no, I don't have Tourette's syndrome. I just find it easier to share what's on my mind so people don't assume I'm keeping secrets from them. Would you like me to continue reading my Wikipedia page, or is that enough exposition to satisfy your trust? Siobhan took a deep breath, conscious that her words may have turned a few heads in the booths around them. She took another swig of her milkshake before relaxing her elbows on the table. Margot had not changed her posture, but she nodded along for half a minute after Siobhan had finished. Hardly loud enough to hear over runaround Sue, Margot uttered, "You can ask me about it." It felt like all the noise in the restaurant died, and suddenly they were the only two people in the entire room. "Excuse me?" Margot's attention darted around the tabletop, shyly repeating the sentence. You can ask me about it," she said again. "No one ever asked me about it." She was not ashamed of the truth, Siobhan realized, and her heart broke in half to hear Margot's voice crack as she admitted that. Her heart was pounding in her ears, and she imagined this was what it felt like inside Riley's head all the time. "All right," she said carefully, knowing that whatever this conversation was, Margot was opening the door for her to fill a role no one else had filled. It was imperative she start on the right foot. "Tell me about them," she offered. "Your siblings, I mean." They talked for so long they almost missed the monorail back to Truman High. By that point, both girls had opened up more than either probably thought they would. Siobhan was glad she had trusted that voice in her head and given Margot the benefit of listening first. She'd been right. All of it was purely defensive, and after Margot admitted the way everyone else had treated her since Wyatt was expelled from the company, Siobhan completely understood her hostility toward anyone new. "I'm fine," she had said when the question had finally been raised. "I'm not some infant incapable of taking care of myself the way Wendy believes I am. I can still walk to school. I can still force myself to eat. I don't understand why it's so hard to believe I can't continue to function after what happened." "Because no one else has endured what you have," Siobhan replied honestly. "What, does that mean everything they do is justified?" Margot continued. "That they're just doing their best?" "No, but it could have happened to anybody," she raged. "Tell me you and Riley..." Siobhan held up a finger to stop her in her tracks. "No." "What do you mean, no?" Margot challenged. I don't think it's as common an experience as you make it out to be," Siobhan held. Margot swore her disagreement. "But you said, if you bring my parents back into this..." "No, but Margot, I've never kissed a boy. Nor do I have any intention of doing so anytime soon." Like before, the air was completely sucked out of the room. For a moment, she thought Margot was going to start laughing. "Shut up. I'm being serious. You've never... That's not who I am," Siobhan said firmly. "And if that surprises you, then you have a lot to learn about where I put my principles." Margot's jaw was practically dislocated from her cranium. "You and Riley... I already answered whatever question is about to come out of your mouth," Siobhan finished. "Either you accept that, or you need to reconsider me as a friend. Is that understood?" Margot paused, recomposing herself with a deep breath. "I mean, yes," she said peculiarly. "It's just not very common for people outside the church, I know." Margot shrugged. "But even Emma and Johnny snog in their free time?" Siobhan reasoned. "Probably. But I don't take my examples from other people. Even people I trust. Half the issues I had with my parents was them not trusting that I am who I promised them I am." Margot froze for another long pause. "I respect the hell out of that." "Thank you," Siobhan smiled. "Not many people believe me when I tell them. Even my sister thought I was batty for it. Sure threw Riley for a loop, at least at first." At the mention of his name, Margot's expression changed, but she seemed more distracted by someone behind her walking out the door. "Can I ask you a question?" Siobhan raised when they finally followed the crowd back to the train. "Is it about Jason?" Margot asked cautiously. "No," Siobhan shrugged. "Wyatt?" "No," she denied. "Completely unrelated, actually." Despite all she had shared already, a wave of relief floated behind Margot's face. Sure, I guess," she said. "About what?" Siobhan sighed, grabbing a hold of the tether loop hanging from the ceiling as the car pulled away from the station. "This is going to sound really stupid," she started. "But it's about training." Margot had been staring off into space, but now her eyes narrowed, and she turned to Siobhan with a confused look. "What?" I'm a terrible shot, Siobhan admitted. I've been terrible for 3 years, and I've hardly improved with 6 different trainers in my time around the world, no matter the weapon. Margot continued to stare at her, uncertain. Everyone's been laughing at me for the last 3 days because I can't hit the broadside of a barn, and the only reason I think Xander hasn't corrected me is because it's my final year in the program, and I think he's afraid to embarrass me. Margot nodded slowly. Okay, she tilted. What's the question? What's your trick? Siobhan blurted. This time Margot actually did laugh. My trick? She chuckled. What are you talking about? I'm a terrible shot. You're not. Siobhan shook her head. You've registered more kills in training than anyone else in the squad since I came to town. Trust me, I counted. More than Johnny? Margot questioned, disbelieving the authenticity of her stats. Yes, even more than Johnny, Siobhan confirmed. Well, Johnny's more accurate, Margot deflected. Maybe, Siobhan admitted, swinging to the side as the train rolled around a curve. But I'm not asking Johnny, am I? I'm asking you. Margot shook her head. Yes, but why are you asking me? She wondered. Because you're my friend. The words cleared the room for the 3rd time. Margot's face drained from pink to white. Am I? You are, Siobhan nodded, before adding, and I figure if you're offering advice now, maybe you won't be afraid to come to someone the next time you need some. Again Margot paused, letting the words sit over them. Her blue eyes seemed to circle around her pupils like a pair of loading icons, waiting for a response to generate. All right, she said. You want to know what I've noticed? Obviously, why else would I be asking the question? Margot broke into a smile, leading Siobhan to do the same. You hold the gun like you're afraid of it. Sorry I didn't grow up in America, Siobhan backhanded. I'm more comfortable with a potato and a balaclava. Neither did I, Margot crossed. But I've still learned it's a lot easier to fire a weapon if you respect it, rather than fear it. Siobhan rolled her eyes. If you tell me to date the thing, lean into it, Margot interrupted. Siobhan paused. Excuse me? Lean into it, Margot repeated. Next time you fire a gun, don't lean back. Lean forward. You're in control of it, not the other way around. Siobhan thought about all the times she'd fired a weapon, struggling to remember the exact details, and wondered if Margot was telling the truth. Are you being serious? She raised. That's it. Margot rolled her shoulders. Try it today. See what happens, she offered. Siobhan accepted the advice with a smile and a nod. All right, she said. Thank you. The train pulled into the residential center, the doors opening to lead them back to class.